I just finished up my first day with Bone Spirit, and while I knew it was going to be a crazy strong build, I didn't realize it was actually going to be a very good leveling build, and I also didn't realize how easy it was to get online. You can see in just one day of gameplay, I think I did about 19 hours today or so, I'm already hitting for 750 million per Bone Spirit, when everything's ramped and working correctly, but still 750 million damage. I've got everything in the game on farm. I'm level 100. I've already got all my glyphs to 15. Everything is going incredibly well. This build is incredibly smooth leveler, and it transitions into an absolute destroyer in the mid to late game. And obviously, it is one of the best scaling builds in the game, and by the time this build is fully online, it's going to be doing billions of damage per Bone Spirit. But even in this early state, this build is absolutely broken, okay? You should be playing this build right now. And part of what makes this build so good for leveling is actually the fact that tempering's carried over from last season. This is something I didn't realize was going to happen. I don't think anybody realized this was going to happen. What that means is that at level 1, you can actually temper on, like, I believe it's like 70% Bone Spirit size onto your weapon. And that's going to make your clears so much easier. On top of that, you can also temper on the Casting Macabre skills restores primary resource. You just temper the primary resource restoration on Macabre cast onto both your rings and even your necklace, and then you put on Bone Spirit size on your weapon, and you've got a real solid speed farm leveling build. Very, very solid, very strong. And overall, I've just been blown away by this build. Like I said, I knew it was going to be good, but holy smokes, it is so much better than I expected. So what I want to talk about today is all the different things that I've learned playing this build, and the different strategies and techniques that I used, and the different priorities I had with farming. And I think once we go over all these things, you're going to see that Bone Spirit comes aligned very easily, and that no matter where you are right now, as long as you're at least like level 50 or so, at least level 40 maybe, you can start playing this build right now, okay? This is an incredibly powerful build, and it's going to take you far. So let's start at the very beginning, and it's something we've already talked about, but it's the Bone Spirit size and the Casting Macabre skill restores resource. The reason why this is so important and so strong is because Bone Spirit doesn't have a cost. And so whenever you cast it, consumes all your resource, right? But the thing is, these restoring your resource adds such a massive multiplier, because with no upgrades, this is adding 15 to 21 primary resource on cast. So let's say you average that to 17 on 2 rings, that's 34. So you're getting 34 essence on cast. So in theory, if you're spamming Bone Spirits, it's 4% increased damage per cast. I know it's a lot of math, but 34 times 4 is 136, if I'm not so tired I'm screwing this up. So it's 136 multiplier just for having those 2 temperings on your rings. And that allows you to be spamming out these Bone Spirits, doing ludicrous amounts of damage. And so in the early stages of the build, you want to do that, and you also want to invest into Bone Splinters, actually, which sounds kind of weird at first. But I actually leveled with 5 ranks of Bone Splinters just so that I could clear up individual mobs that were left behind. Because every once in a while, the Bone Spirit gets a little clunky, to be honest. If you don't crit, the cooldown can be a bit lengthy, and it can get awkward at times. But having 5 ranks in Bone Splinters actually cleans up the leveling quite a bit and makes it a bit easier. Now, I'm not claiming that Bone Spirit is the best leveling build, but honestly, I would say it's like a high B or A tier leveling build. It's very solid, okay? It's a lot better than I expected it to be. And obviously, the reason why I liked leveling it with it so much is because it made it so easy to transition to this build later in the game. So let's talk about that transition. Obviously, the overall goal of this build is to eventually make it into an overpowered Bone Spirit build. But before you can do that, you need a lot of uniques, and you're not going to have those in the early game. So before you have those uniques, instead of investing into overpower, we're going to be investing purely into Bone Spirit itself. So we're going to be looking for maximum essence, crit damage, all that normal Bone Spirit goodness, right? Just lots of damage for your Bone Spirit itself, no bother at all to overpower. And one unique that you really want to fish for early is the Path of Trag'Oul. This is going to help a lot as you get into the end game version where you're playing with overpower, but even when you're not playing the overpower, this is going to do a lot for one aspect slot. For starters, these boots actually generate a decent amount of essence because all of these Bone Splinters that they're shooting are going to generate essence, which is really cool. The other thing that they're going to do is give you maximum essence. So every time one of those Bone Splinters hits an enemy, it's going to give you maximum essence. And of course, as we discussed previously, the more essence you have, the more damage Bone Spirit does. And what's cool about Bone Spirit is the more essence you have because of Dreadful Bone Spirit, the more that you actually generate back after you cast Bone Spirit, because you generate 30% of your maximum after each cast. So what that means is after you Bone Spirit, the more essence you have, the more essence you get back. So pretty nice little synergy there. Now, the other thing that these boots do, well, I should also mention, armor is a very good stat. It's very hard to find in the early game, so getting that extra armor is actually a massive boost. The other thing is they have movement speed, which is also really nice because it's hard to find movement speed boots. But the final thing I want to talk about that is such a big deal is the Bone Prison cooldown reduction. So obviously with the Path of Tregulan, you're going to get these huge bone prisons that are going to cover a big portion of the map. And the reduced cooldown is going to mean you're going to get these bone splinters up more often. But more importantly, that's going to give you better uptime on the Imprisoned Spirits aspect. Now, the Imprisoned Spirits aspect is a new aspect. And whenever you cast, whenever a Bone Spirit blows up inside of your Bone Prison, it's actually going to explode again for 70% of its damage. So yes, this is a 70% damage multiplier, and the boots fully enable that. And so you can see that like the boots are giving you better uptime on Bone Prison, they're giving you maximum essence, they're giving you essence generation, armor, movement speed, ranks of bone skills, which reduces the cooldown of Bone Prison even more, and increases the damage of both your Bone Splinters, by the way, and your Bone Spirit. So these boots are just doing so much. So definitely make sure that you get over to Grigor very early, okay? I did him, I think we started grinding him at like level 70 in order to get these boots, because it was just really important to find these. Now, in the mid-game version, you want like a lot of crit chance, like I said, and you want a lot of cooldown reduction, because you're going to be running into some issues. So right here, whenever your Bone Spirit crits, its cooldown is reduced by 7 seconds. So if you don't crit, that means your cooldown is 7 seconds longer. And that's where some of the clunkiness can come in, which is why, you know, I suggested that you invest fairly heavily into Bone Splinters. But as an added thing, try to find as much crit chance and as much cooldown reduction on your gear as you can to reduce the probability of something clunky happening. One other unique that we just have to talk about for this like early overpowered version of the build is the Blood Artisan's Cuirass. This unique is crazy strong. It is incredibly powerful. It does so many good things. And the best part is that it also drops off of Grigor, which obviously we're already doing Grigor to get the boots, so it works out perfectly. So the Blood Artisan's Cuirass, if you don't know, after you pick up 3 Blood Orbs, spawns a free Bone Spirit. And what's great about this item is it was just massively buffed, and it now does a lot. So first of all, the HP roll on this item is significantly higher than a normal chest piece. You can see my chest piece is already 4 out of 12 masterworked, and the maximum max life roll is only 1,004, whereas on the Blood Artisans, it's already 1,250 with no upgrades. So even with no upgrades, it already does 25% more of maximum life. So that's really strong. It gives you a huge additive damage with 135% after you pick up a Blood Orb. Then it also makes Blood Orbs give you back Essence, which obviously more Essence, more damage, gives you ranks of Bone Spirit, and it also spawns the free Bone Spirits. This is insanely powerful in AoE, and I loved having this when leveling. Specifically, I was running the Blighted Corpse Tendrils so that I was constantly spawning Blood Orbs in AoE, and this just adds this level of consistency, this level of Essence generation, this level of ginormous Bone Spirits coming out and obliterating things, and it's going to make your AoE clear quite a bit more comfortable. Overall, this unique cannot be passed up in the leveling version. But once you get into the overpowered version, you will be dropping this. So, with that, let's start talking a little bit about the overpowered version, how it works, and how to get the most value out of it. So, for those of you who are unfamiliar, the overpowered version relies on getting Bone Spirit's cost to 275 Essence, so that every single cast of Bone Spirit procs the Bannersword's Talisman, giving us a guaranteed overpower. On top of that, because we're able to reach 100% crit chance, we're also critting every single Bone Spirit, meaning it's proccing the 60% damage multiplier. This means we're able to get full value out of overpower, out of crit, and out of bone skill multipliers. All of those things all channeling into this, and on top of that, this build also has the maximum essence double dip. So this is just incredible damage scaling. So the goal here is to get to the point where not only are we able to spend 275 essence per Bone Spirit, but that we're also able to easily get our cooldown back, and we're also able to get the essence back. And so that's the crux of what makes the endgame version. Now, what you're looking at on me is ragtag gear that I found while I was leveling, but the goals of your gear should be to meet certain quotas. So let me explain what I'm talking about. So this build actually has a ton of wiggle room into how it gets to that essence cap and as to how it gets its cooldown reduction and to how it gets its resource back. So what I want to talk about is the different ways and the different tools that you might find while leveling that you can use to solve these problems. Because remember, this version of the build is not the final in-game perfect, every slot on gear is exactly what you want it to be. This is like, you're leveling, you've been playing for 20 hours, and you're just throwing on what you get. Okay, so let's talk about that. So for starters, the most important piece is the Requiem aspect, and exactly how you choose to manipulate this aspect plays a big part in what your build actually looks like and what it plays like. So the Requiem aspect is going to give you maximum essence for each active minion. So this is very strong. And what's really, really strong about this aspect is that it actually counts bone prisons as minions. So you can see here I have 184 essence. I cast this, I go all the way up to 244, and obviously it keeps going up because they're casting. But this takes me all the way up to 244 essence. That is crazy, right? This is crazy. And with the Trade boots, we're actually getting extra bone prisons. So we're getting even more procs of the Requiem. So this alone is going to give us huge amounts of essence and get us a lot closer to that cap. On top of this, we also can play skeletal warriors and specifically defenders because they can become essentially damage immune. And right now I get 4 of these guys out. That's an extra 28 maximum resource. On top of that, if you want even more resource, you can play with cold mages with their primary attack generates essence. This is actually pretty nice. You're going to have mages generating essence, and they're going to give you essence cap. Very strong whenever you're low on maximum essence. Keep in mind though, these mages are going to die a lot, and you're going to have to res them, which could be kind of annoying. So you don't necessarily need to do that. And if you're not a fan of resing the mages, then you can always sacrifice Shadow, which is what I'm doing currently because frankly I just don't have the gear to run Bone yet. Bone is going to give me another 30% multiplier, which is crazy. But for now, I'm forced to run Shadow because I need the maximum essence and I need the essence generation. So you can see that there's like kind of a dynamic problem here that you're going to have to figure out based on what gear you have. If you find that kind of thing interesting, this is a great build for you. If you don't like that kind of thing, just throw on Trade Ghouls, throw on Requiem, play with Warriors out, get like maximum essence on your helmet, and you'll be fine, okay? But if you like thinking about it, this is what the kind of thing you want to think about. And on top of that, or while we're on the topic, let's talk about my helmet. So you're going to see I'm playing Harlequin, and you're going to be like, oh my god, you have a Harlequin day 1. This is so stupid. You've scanned me. But actually, Harlequin is not a very good item for this build. It's okay, but you really actually just want a legendary helmet because the Harlequin doesn't have essence per second on it. And yeah, if you look at my chest piece, it says 5 essence per second. Okay, that's not that impressive. Why do I care so much? Well, the reality is that that actually gets multiplied by the Torment aspect. So this 170% damage... 170% essence increase that you get after you crit, which is all the time, is actually going to apply to essence per second rolls on your gear. And because we're running the Trade Ghoul boots, we are very low on essence per second slot. So the Harlequin is actually not good in this build. You really need maximum essence, cooldown reduction, and essence per second helmet for this build to be functioning properly. And the last thing I want to say about the flex slot is actually your offhand. So unfortunately, the offhand got nerfed, so it doesn't have as much cooldown reduction anymore. And I think in the final version of the build, I'm really leaning towards two-hand. But when you're trying to get the build together, especially when you're first starting to play this overpower build, you really want an offhand. This can be really strong. It can have maximum essence, cooldown reduction, and main stat, which main stat's really good for us. So we want maximum essence and cooldown reduction. Those are the biggest things, and that's going to help us reach our essence cap a lot easier. And the last thing I want to mention is how exactly you should farm for Banished Lords. And of course, Blood Moon's Breaches, which we haven't talked about yet. But these are just a straight up 150% damage multiplier once you get the Banshee's Lord Talisman. And luckily, both of these items drop off of both Duriel and on Duriel. So once you get to the end game and you can start farming them, you can grab these 2 items. Now, if you want more information about the final overpower build, more is coming, okay? I'm still learning the build. I'm getting pretty good at it. I'm up to a pit 100 so far. You can see I'm hitting 750 mils, but there's a lot of work to be done here. So if you want to, watch the work happening, feel free to check out my stream, check out my builds on Mobalytics, join our Discord, whatever it is, whatever your fancy is, or you can just wait and I'll be posting on here in the next couple of days with, a more final in-game version of the build. But regardless, I appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoy this build. I'm having a blast with it. So, all right, peace out, everybody.